course I trust you, August Christopher. I mean, Vincent Ferrara. I mean, Martin de Porres. Thomas More. After all, you are my personal saint.
You have to be a very good and usually very dead person to become a saint. And more importantly, you have to work 3 miracles.
A thief and master of disguise tries to outmaneuver a Russian oligarch and steal the secret to cold fusion. This week, special guest Daron from the Board Games Are for Losers podcast joins us to talk about buying art in sewers, why I owe Val Kilmer $10, and how the pandemic has affected rat racing. Then we find out if 1997's The Saint stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut, and Alan says as a father blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Test of Time podcast. My name is Alan Noah, and I got 2 people here on my video screen. Let's go with James. You go first.
Thanks, Al, for the lovely introduction there. And, you know, we've always talked about firsts on our show. And, we've had several members of a very exclusive club, the Five Timers Club. But we are proud to introduce today the first member of the Six Timers Club.
Woo woo!
Let us reintroduce to the show the host of the podcast Board Games Are for Losers, the one and the only Daron.
Thanks for having me on again, guys. That was actually a nice introduction, and I like how I weaseled myself onto 6 times on the podcast. I'm sure this will be my last.
I mean, honestly, we say it's going to be your last time every time you're here. I mean, it's always a nightmare.
And literally, you kept me away. You created a pandemic just to keep me out of James's apartment, yet I still managed to find my way on.
Wait, you're accusing us of starting the pandemic?
If I say it enough times, it's true.
Oh, God. This is terrible. You're going to kill our reputation.
Yeah, right. So I'm really happy to be on because I really need your guys' professional opinion on something.
Ooh, what's that?
Well, first, Al, I don't really know what you do. So, and I already talked to James about all my medical issues. So I need your podcasting professional opinion. Okay.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
So I've been watching Cobra Kai.
Oh, so good.
Yeah. So now I'm only halfway through the 3rd season. Don't spoil it for me. My question for you is it bad? Like, is the show terrible and I just like it because I'm remembering the old Karate Kid and having nostalgia about 80s music? Or is it really a bad show? I can't figure it out.
No, I think it's a very, very good show. I think what they have managed to do is take a beloved property and age it in a really smart way, where it takes all of the stuff that you loved about the Karate Kid, but updates it in a way that's authentic and organic and makes sense for the modern times. I mean, like, the criticism that you could make about the Karate Kid is it's sort of like, oh, he's the good guy and he's the bad guy. But in the show, and this isn't a spoiler because this is very clear in seasons 1 and 2, it's not so clear of who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. And there's nuance and there's shades of gray. And I think it's masterfully done. I think all 3 seasons are great. I'm excited for you to finish up season 3. I will spoil nothing other than to say that I think the ending of the season is incredibly strong. I tore through season 3 in I think a week, and I think it's just amazing all around.
I agree with Al in that the show is good. It's bonkers, though. It's ridiculous in a lot of ways. I mean, there's all-out karate brawls in high school, and I don't know if you've seen it yet, Daron, but there's a part where some scrawny little kid gets thrown through a kitchen window, like a glass kitchen window, and several kids are thrown into glass coffee tables. Nobody really gets seriously injured, except for there's literally been one one serious injury in the entire show. The thing I do like about the show is that while it does lean into pretty much every single reference they could to the three movies, and I'm still convinced that they are going to bring Hilary Swank back for a cameo at some point. She was in the next Karate Kid. It does a good job of not simply having every episode be like, remember when Miyagi said wax on, wax off? It's nods to the show, but it really is what would happen to these teenagers when they're in their 40s. And that is what I like about it. And it does take it in interesting directions, but I'll say it is a bonkers show.
Okay.
I object to your use of the word bonkers. I just watched Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar. That movie is bonkers. Cobra Kai is not bonkers. I feel like Cobra Kai is more or less grounded in reality. It stretches credibility at points, but to me, bonkers is like Killer Clowns from Outer Space. That's bonkers.
I just think all-out brawls around this town of karate gangs, and I just think it is kind of bonkers. But it's fun. I do not think it's a bad show. I think it's a fun show.
Okay, interesting. Well, I would agree on the bonkers part because it just seems like Daniel gets into karate fights just like shaking hands. He goes up and he's like, hey, we're going to work together now to solve this problem. Then they don't like working together. And they just fight each other randomly all the time. Like, grown men don't do that. I'm sorry. You don't karate chop everybody you see.
Speak for yourself.
I will say that Ralph Macchio is the least believable fighter in this entire show. William Zabka, he's good. All the kids are well cast, but Ralph Macchio, he still has such a baby face that I just can't believe that he was able to beat up an entire garage full of criminals.
Yeah, it does defy belief sometimes. I like Kreese's character still. He's just creepy, evil old man, and they give him a little bit of a backstory, which I thought was nice, probably unnecessary, but his character is great.
But that's an example of what they've done right. This guy is the villain and he's evil, but they show you his backstory and you sort of see how that happened. And even though you hate him and you root against him, they've allowed him to be like an actual human being and not just a two-dimensional villain.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'm going to thank you because this vouches for the big hawk tattoo I got on my back in honor of the show. And Lorelai was really upset about it, but I said, this show's good. You should watch it.
That is awesome. But when we've talked about The Karate Kid, I have mentioned my sincere and undying love for Elizabeth Shue, who is, of course, in the first Karate Kid movie. And she is also in 1997's The Saint, which is the movie that you picked, Daron, for your sixth time on the podcast. So what was it about this movie that made you want to talk about it?
Well, unwittingly, James actually offered me a few choices of movies, and I had forgotten completely about The Saint, that I loved this movie in, I guess, late in high school, early college. I just completely forgot because I haven't seen it since then. But my friends and I, we were obsessed with Elizabeth Shue, obviously. And Val Kilmer.
Oh, okay, sure.
But what I remember about it is her and not understanding the plot whatsoever about Cold Fusion. I was like, I have no idea what's going on, but I'll rewatch it. It's funny. There's great lines, and Elizabeth Shue is great. And so when James suggested it as one of the movies, I was like, that's absolutely it. I can't believe I didn't remember this. This should have been the second or third movie I did.
And, it's sort of the opposite of Cobra Kai, which is a TV series based on a movie. The Saint is a 1997 movie that's based on, well, it's originally, I think it was a series of books or comics, but it was primarily based on the 1960s spy series starring future James Bond Roger Moore.
Wow, so my topic, it was really on point then with Cobra Kai. That was a great tie-in.
Very good. Yeah, the book series started in the 20s, and then it was movies in the 30s and 40s and 50s. It was a 40s radio series, and then it was a TV show in the 60s with Roger Moore, like you said. It was also a 1970s TV show. I mean, it's a property that has been around and reinvented several times over the last almost century.
I would be shocked if this doesn't become a streaming series on one of the 28 streaming networks that are around now.
It could. There were talks of a reboot last year. I forget who they said was attached to direct. It was before the pandemic hit, but they were talking about doing a new movie.
If this is originally from the 20s, I would imagine that the rights have gone public domain. So, you can't base it on the 97 movie or the 1960s series, but just like Sherlock Holmes, you could take the general premise of this and use it on your own without any rights.
I suppose that's true. So this version of The Saint, the 1997 movie, is about international thief Simon Templar, played by Val Kilmer, who's a master of disguise, and he always uses Roman Catholic saints as his aliases. When he's contracted by Russian oil magnate Ivan Tretiak to steal a formula for cold fusion, he meets and seduces scientist Dr. Emma Russell, played by Elizabeth Shue. Brrr. Yeah, there you go. Realizing that Tretiak wants to suppress the formula rather than give free, limitless energy to the world, Simon works with Russell to complete her formula while evading Tretiak's goons. So, James, when this movie came out in 1997, was it a big hit, or were all the people who liked the books from the 1920s long dead?
Well, this movie had a really high budget, especially for the time. It was budgeted at $68 million, and it came out on April 4th, 1997, and it opened at number 2 with $20 million, on its way to only $60 million in the States. It eventually did gross $169 million worldwide, so perhaps it did make a couple bucks. And the number 1 film when it opened in April 97, it was a really big hit from Jim Carrey, and it was a 2-word title with only 1 word used twice.
Oh, Dumb and Dumber.
Close, but it's the same word twice.
Are those words ordinarily preceded by the phrase pants on fire?
Oh.
That is correct.
Fibber,
liar.
fibber. Oh, liar, liar.
I remember seeing Liar, Liar in the theater. I did not see The Saint in the theater or ever before just today.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I feel like it was very underrated, and not many people knew about it. I guess the box office kind of reflects that. It wasn't a very popular movie. Maybe it did better in Russia.
Well, it's kind of front loaded. I mean, it made $20 million and only $60 million in the States. So, it's only a 3 times multiplier. So, a lot of people saw it in the beginning and then it kind of puttered out. And actually, I did see it in the theater. I've mentioned this before, but in 96, 97, I had a friend that worked in the theater, and every Thursday night, they would get a reel of film, and you had to run the reel on Thursday night before all the Friday premieres. So he would invite all of us to come out. I saw this film, I saw Beavis and Butthead Do America, the Star Wars special editions, and I guess I didn't contribute to the $20 million it made opening weekend, but I did see it opening weekend.
So you saw it illegally, is what you're saying?
No, I saw... No, if I... Was it illegal? I mean, it was playing in the theater, and I was invited to see it.
You're stuttering a lot there.
Okay, Val Kilmer, I owe you $10. This is also peak Val Kilmer, because this is a couple years after Batman Forever. He was in Tombstone as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, he was very popular at this time. But I hadn't seen this movie, I guess, in 24 years. And I really did not remember this opening at all. And I'm not really sure why this opening exists. But it opens when they're young kids, and it's in some, Catholic school. And I guess you get the idea that he learns about the saints.
I love this opening. I think it's his origin story without having to do any voiceover or do a long explanation. I mean, basically it says he's in an orphanage, and at this orphanage they assign all the kids saints' names, but he refuses because that's not his given name, and he gets the shit kicked out of him by the priest because he refuses to acknowledge his name. I think it's John Rossi. And then they punish the entire orphanage because of his behavior. They don't let the kids have food, and they lock the girls in their dorm. So Simon manages to pick the lock on the food cart, give everybody food, then they go over to rescue the girls. And upon doing that, it's noticed that they escape from their beds, and they released the dogs, which I thought was a little bit aggressive for an orphanage. And I mean, who does that? But anyway, the dogs scare Simon's girlfriend, or what you think is his girlfriend, and she falls off the balcony and dies. So to me, that's his origin story. He doesn't trust anybody. This is why he named himself after saints, and this is why he's so crazy.
I really was expecting that the Elizabeth Shue character was that girl who, like, you think she dies, but then it turns out she just got like a bum heart from the fall for some reason, because her character is like always complaining about her heart. She's got a bad heart. She needs pills. I was kind of waiting for like that twist, quote unquote, that turned out not to be the case. But I get it from like the setting up his character point of view. It is a little bit weird. The text on screen, when it shows that, it says at whatever Catholic school yesterday, and then when it goes to the quote unquote present, it says Moscow tomorrow, which I thought was like trying to be clever and kind of wasn't.
No, you know what they were doing? They were anticipating we'd review this movie on this podcast, and they were making themselves timeless. They didn't pin themselves into a time period. Brilliant.
Whoa.
I actually thought what it was referring to was that this is slightly in the near future. It's not exactly today because we don't have cold fusion today, but it's basically today. But it's like anytime slightly before flying cars, it still has the technology that we have today. So I thought that's what they were going for. And it opens up in Moscow, and there's this guy, this oligarch, Ivan Tretiak, and he's this oil billionaire. And you got to remember that this is post-Soviet Union Russia. So this is like the Boris Yeltsin years. This is a really bad time to be in Russia. Like, you are starving. Like, there's no order. It's kind of anarchy. And this guy, Ivan, he's trying to gain popularity because there's going to eventually be an overthrow of this kind of Boris Yeltsin-like character. There's supposed to be this oil shortage. We open on him giving some speech in some tower, but outside of this tower, there's one of these guys, you know, the human fly kind of thing, who, you know, sort of a Mission Impossible character who's scaling the tall building and I guess suction cups or whatever apparatus he's using.
Yeah, so he scales the building, and he breaks into this room by crawling through this temperature control laser beams. I liked how his watch read the temperature of the beams and the room and his suit. I was like, that's a nice watch, a little overkill probably, because when else does he use that watch? But
true.
He goes through there and gets to this safe. He cracks it open and he steals this microchip. And at that point, he's confronted by Tretiak's son, the oligarch's son. And what I love about this scene is just the two one-liners from Tretiak's son, who's like, "It's the wrong place for a condom," because he's still wearing that full black hooded suit and he looks like a condom. And then at some point he says, "Suck me sideways," which I've never heard as an insult, but I think it's good. I'm going to start using that now.
I mean, I was debating like maybe watching this movie with my son, and I ended up not doing that. But then as soon as he said "suck me sideways," I'm like, and I made the right decision there. They have like this fight, and it ends with the saint, we'll just call him Simon, but it ends with Simon jumping out of the building, and while he's falling into like this parachute thing, he takes off his fake mustache, like during the fall. Like, you could wait till after you land to ditch the mustache.
Well, as we find out, one of his trademarks is that he's a master of disguise. Like, very quickly, he will completely change his look. And right after he hits this air mat that's waiting for him, and he falls like 50 stories onto this thing. This is not like jumping off like a 4-story office building. I can't imagine this really broke his fall, but it does. You know, we'll take it that it does.
As a doctor, that's possible, right?
Oh yeah, you totally learn in medical school the maximum height you can fall from a building. But
Cool.
I do like this aspect of his character, that he can just change his appearance. And, you know, he winds up escaping. He quickly puts on another robe, and he turns into like, you know, some sort of like Russian homeless guy, and gives another guy a bottle of vodka. And he's like, "Drink with me, brother."
Yeah, he's a master of disguise, absolutely. Because once he escapes Russia, he's on the airplane and he's that slick black hair, like suave. I don't know if he's Italian or what he is. This is his third or fourth disguise in the matter of like 5 minutes in the movie. And he seduces the woman on the plane. You wind up seeing later that she smuggles the microchip for him into England, where he's getting, the run over by the police when he gets there, but he doesn't have that microchip anymore. And it was nice of him, after he banged her, he left her a rose.
That is a very gentlemanly, chivalrous move there. By the way, that woman is Emily Mortimer. I was surprised to see her in this movie. I know her best from The Newsroom, but she's been in a bunch of things. But now Simon is hired by the Trediacs to steal this recipe for cold fusion. And cold fusion is almost like a myth in science, because what they say about it in this movie is accurate, that if you were to figure out this thing, you could have nearly free, limitless energy. It would end the energy crisis. It would end pollution. It would give power to the world, everyone for free. But no one can crack it. It seems impossible. And every 10 or 20 years, someone says, oh, we're very close to cracking it. And it never happens. But Trediac is convinced that the scientist is going to be able to do it. And she's on the verge. And so he hires Simon to steal the formula, even though Simon just stole from him and they should hate each other. He figures, well, he's good, so he'll hire him to do this job for him.
Was that your interpretation of it? Because I had the same question. Why would he hire this guy? I thought, okay, so he knows he's good, and then also he gets to kill him later as a payback? Because he clearly indicates he's going to kill him.
I think that was it.
Yeah, I almost thought it was like the microchip was a setup, to see if this guy was good enough to be hired, but it's not. But we quickly get to the scientist that seemingly has cracked this case, and that is Dr. Emma Russell, played by Elizabeth Shue. And she is, I actually think she is a wonderful actress, just on her merits. You guys are both pigs.
I like her merits too.
Me too.
So we see her kind of addressing, a scientific community that she seems to have broken the formula for cold fusion, and he's broken into her apartment, and he's trying to find out a little bit about her. And one thing that struck me is that he's monologuing to himself. He's not holding a little tape recorder that he can be like, she's definitely eccentric and she knows what she's doing. He's just saying this almost to camera, but not to camera. So I thought that was an interesting choice. I'm not sure if he does that in the old series. Maybe it's a reference to that.
I mean, it's voiceover, except that he's talking to himself. It's weird.
It was weird, and I thought they had set up earlier because he was listening in his apartment to his old recordings that he had made of another job that he was doing, or of the Trediacs, I think. And
right.
So I thought that's what he was doing. It made sense. He's obviously just narrating voice recording, and then he didn't have one. I was like, what is going on here? But yeah, I put a note. I was like, that's a cheap voiceover, isn't it? And Al's going to be mad.
Yeah, I mean, it's just unnatural. You wouldn't be rummaging through her apartment looking for something and making these observations and speaking them aloud to no one. That's just not a thing that I would assume a master spy, thief, master of disguise would do. I don't know from personal experience, but it just seems weird. And I do want to just get back to this whole thing of has she cracked the code of cold fusion? Because she hasn't. She's close to it, maybe kind of, but she hasn't officially cracked it yet. So how the hell does Trediac, this Russian oligarch, know about this American scientist who's in England who maybe is kind of close to it? So she thinks? I just don't get the mechanics of this.
It seems to me that there's probably like when Einstein made his relativity theory, E equals MC squared, all that, it seems like you don't just come up with, I got it, E equals MC squared. There are probably 20 breakthroughs that he got to get to E equals MC squared, and she's basically gotten past where anyone else has ever gotten, and she's on step 19 of 20. She's E equals MC to the 1.9 power, and she's almost there. That's what it seems to be, and she's just kind of working out the last bits of it.
It seems to me that she has the correct pieces of the formula, and that's what everybody knows, that she believes in it, and she believes she has it, and she keeps on referencing oh, I just got to put it in the right order, which I was like, seems weird. Like you would just like puzzle pieces that you're shifting around. But that to me was setting up that she knows she has the right parts. She just has to figure out how to assemble it correctly. And that she's one of the only people that truly believes that she can do it.
Now Simon, he disguised himself as this artist, kind of this South African guy, and he goes to this statue that he knows that Emma Russell loves, and he's just sitting there and he's sketching the statue, and he's very intriguing. He winds up leaving his sketch pad, and she picks it up. She reads, "Oh, this guy is so wonderful," but it's kind of filled with things that you assume he picked up from her apartment that she would be into, and he winds up meeting her in the restaurant where she is. This is totally not creepy to her in any way, but he sits down with her and they order a bunch of bottles of wine, and they wind up taking things back to her place.
Well, yeah, but first he does this thing where he like reads her. Like he tells her about who she really is. And of course he's cheating because he was rummaging around in her apartment, and so he knows everything about her that way. But then she reads him, and she's able to read the real him, Simon, and not this phony character that he's playing. And it gets to him, and he like runs out of the restaurant, and then he figures he needs some kind of ploy to get back into her graces, so he cuts himself and he's bleeding everywhere, and then she takes him back to his apartment, and that's where they have the romantic interlude. Although it is weird that like as they're like about to sleep together, all of a sudden there's like 15 lit candles all around her apartment. Like, when the hell did she stop to light all of these candles? Like, she brought him to the apartment to tend to his open wound on his forehead. And then she's like, wait, hold on. I just got to create some ambiance here. It's going to take me about 20 minutes to light all of these candles. You just apply pressure to the wound. It'll be worth it later.
You always have to be prepared for love, Al. What can I say?
I mean, it is a little bit weird. They spend the night together. He leaves with the formula, and she goes to Scotland Yard, and these guys are like hot on Simon's trail, apparently, kind of, but also not really, because like Emma's the one who points out to them that he's using names of saints. And like, you could sort of buy that, like, all right, maybe they didn't go to Catholic school. They don't know all the names of the saints. And yeah, this is before Google, so they wouldn't just like have easy access to that information. But you got to think someone at Scotland Yard would have picked up on it, like after he used like the 8th or 9th saint name.
It's an Anglican country.
I don't know what his actual country of origin is, but if he's running around stealing things all over the world, Scotland Yard probably, they're kind of interested in him, but they really don't care that much because he's not seemingly committing any crimes in their country. So it seems like they have two people working the case, but they're like, oh yeah, here's these pictures of him. Yeah, he's got a bunch of names. I mean, yeah, maybe they should have made the connection, but I don't really think they care all that much. They're helping out the Russians and they're helping out whoever when he comes back into the country. But as far as we know, he didn't commit any crimes in England.
Fair point.
What I found amazing about the Scotland Yard, I guess we can call them bumbling investigators, is that Emma asked them, can you get me the flight itinerary of everybody that flew from England to Moscow? And they gave it to her because she was looking for the saints' names and she was going to follow them. Like, you can't do that.
I mean, yeah, she is a civilian. That does seem not kosher. I want to ask you a question, Daron, because there's a scene that takes place in like this Russian underground club. And when you came on to talk about rounders, you were explaining some of the rules of poker to me, which I appreciated because gambling's not my thing. I was hoping you could explain the rules of this rat game that they're playing in this Russian club, where it's like these rats are in these tubes and I guess they race. Is that it? Is it more intricate than that? I assume this is something you play in your spare time.
Of course, although the pandemic has really affected the rat race club business. So I don't have any inside information. I interpreted it as like horse racing, but just rats inside because it's cold in Russia. So you want to do an indoor race and mice are the only small swallowed up animal. I don't know, but sorry, I can't shed any light on it.
Oh, okay.
I did really like the disguise he has in the rat race scene, which is that he dresses up just like Ivan Tretiak, which I thought was really cool. I thought it was actually a pretty believable disguise. The costume or the makeup wig person in this film is fantastic, and I'm pretty sure he or she was not given an Oscar, but it was fantastic work in this film. I'll give them credit for this.
I read that apparently in the old Saint, I don't remember if it was the novels or the TV show, but apparently he wasn't really a master of disguise, but that was something that Val Kilmer wanted of the character, that he felt like that would make it more interesting. But then apparently Paramount wanted to pull back on that a little bit because they were also doing the Mission Impossible movie. That was kind of a big deal in that movie. But I guess they let him do it anyway because there are a million different costumes and wigs and things in this movie.
It's kind of unnecessary, but I think it adds to the enjoyment of the movie. You get a good laugh out of some of these characters. It doesn't really advance the plot with that some other function could have done, but it's funny. Like, he dresses up like Tretiak, and then he tells the guards, like, yeah, there's an imposter in there, you should go get him. And they're like, oh, get him.
Yeah, I think it's funny you mentioned Mission Impossible, because I was going to say that the makeup work is so much more authentic than the Mission Impossible, which is kind of just like the Tom Cruise or whatever character, they reach to their chin and then just lift off, and you're any person on Earth. And this one, it's obviously Val Kilmer. It's Val Kilmer in heavy makeup. So, it's all practical effects. And this is an actor's dream, to play 12 different roles with 12 different accents, with 12 different personalities. This is what an actor's actor would want to do. And Val Kilmer is apparently one of these, I think he's a method actor. I think he seems to be a very serious actor. So it looked like he was having a lot of fun making this film.
Maybe. But Emma ends up tracking him down in Russia because she got this information from these terrible Scotland Yard people. And so then she confronts Simon and she turns him into the police, except the police aren't the good guys because they work for Tretiak, and they're on the run from Tretiak and his goons, and they end up hiding from them, and Simon ends up going into this freezing river, and there's really nowhere for them to go to warm up because they have said several times that the city is freezing, there's no oil, and they end up being taken in by this kind-hearted prostitute who brings them into her apartment, and there's like a safe room in there. And random fact that I saw on IMDb, the woman who plays the prostitute is the real-life daughter of the actor who plays Tretiak.
And I did love her line, Emma Russell's Elizabeth Shue's line, when she goes up to this prostitute and she's like, "Can you help us? We're in trouble with your mafia." Oh, yes, the Russian mob during a time of anarchy? Come on in, strange Americans. Not offering me any money in any way.
Seems like a bad move on her part. And it does get like one of her friends or apartment mates or someone killed when the bad guys show up there. Also, like, can we talk about how the fact that the bad guys are always right wherever the good guys are? Like, they just happen to be on that one street. Like, these guys don't seem that competent, and yet they're always right there.
You're skipping over the best line in the movie. This is the line I remembered very fondly, and my friends and I would repeat it to each other all the time. When they are caught by the goons and they're in the back of the paddy wagon or police wagon or whatever we want to call it, she's saying, "Oh, I need my heart medicine." And he says, "Oh, I palmed some from you. Just eat it out of my hand." And he has her eat it out of his hand while she's kneeling on the ground. And he goes, "While you're down there." And she looks up at him like, "Are you serious? Like right now?" He's like, "Oh, just get the lock pick from my boot." And she's like, "Oh, okay." So we would say that "while you're down there" line all the time.
To each other?
Yes.
Okay. But they escape. They end up in the sewers, and there they find these like black market buyer sellers who are trying to buy some art.
The sewer art dealer is a little odd. Although, I mean, you've never bought art until you've bought it from a sewer art dealer.
That's true.
And they help them navigate through the sewers up to this manhole, which is supposed to take them directly into the embassy, but it's sealed, so they end up just by the embassy. And of course, where they end up is directly under, Ilya Tretiak's car, because of course. And Simon's plan is for Emma to run towards the embassy, and don't worry, they'll let you in when they see you coming. Like, wait, is that how embassies work? Like, you can just run towards them at full speed and shout, "I'm an," fill in the name of whatever country that embassy is, and they'll open the gate for you, even when there are clearly, like, pissed off, armed, violent protesters outside the gates? I don't think that's a good plan.
No, it doesn't work like that. And I don't even think she says she's an American until they've already opened the gate. Like, they're just like, oh, this chick's running towards us. Let's let her in. Forget about the guy with the automatic rifle right behind her. But don't worry, he'll stop.
I mean, to be fair, it's Elizabeth Shue. So, like, I could imagine that, anyone would open their gates for her, but It still does not seem like a very sound plan.
So Emma's now, she's safely in the embassy. Simon, he's escaped from the goons because he was able to throw a fuse at a car where he was letting the gas leak, and he blows it up, makes a distraction. So there's this other character that we haven't really talked about. There's this scientist that's working for Tretiak, and he's the guy that they were sort of stealing the formula for. So they're going to be like, here, you fix the formula. And this guy's unable to fix it. But Simon breaks into the embassy, and he meets up with Emma, and he's like, I have a plan. And his plan is to actually give the solved formula, which Emma's now solved by this point. He says, I'm going to give the formula to this scientist working for Tretiak, and he's going to help us. We don't know exactly how he's going to help, but he is going to help them.
Which is all contingent on the fact that Emma can actually really, really crack cold fusion, like for real this time, in 2 hours. Because she was so close the whole time, now she just needs 2 hours to, like, really, really get it. Like, the whole basis of the plan is completely contingent on that.
You don't believe her? You don't believe her? She's so adorable. How could you not believe her?
True.
It also seems a little ridiculous because the formula is essentially in 6 pieces on 6 Post-it notes that she keeps in her bra. And the thing is that she winds up doing is that she just had to put them in the correct order. And it just seems like there's only so many ways that you could do this, that you could almost, even in 1997, like, feed these formulas into a computer, and the computer should just be able to figure out all the permutations of this and just go, it's arrangement number 178.
You're not a scientist, James. You don't know.
Right. I mean, cold fusion isn't that simple, James. You need just 2 hours, like, working in a room in the embassy. That's how you crack it. But she does, and Simon gives this new formula to the doctor, and Tretiak's plan is he sells cold fusion to the real Russian president, and then he's going to take that money and then double-cross him, basically, and expose that the president threw all this money at some stupid idea that wasn't going to work.
Which makes no sense, though, because why would he steal a formula that theoretically works? Why not con the president into buying a formula that he says works? This president has no reason to believe it works, so there was no reason to steal a working formula.
No. You got it mixed up. Tretiak originally wanted the formula to work. And when his scientist said, I can't get it to work, I can't rearrange the 6 index cards correctly, he then realized, okay, so I have a non-working formula. What can I do with it now? And he's like, well, the scientist says, well, it looks like it should work. So that's when he comes up with the idea, I'm going to fool the current president, sell him this, says, it's going to work, but you're going to have to pay me $40 billion. So the president believes it because he thinks Tretiak just wants money. And then when he gives him the supposedly broken formula, not knowing that Elizabeth Shue's character will have solved it during that time in the miracle 2 hours. That was the plan. The plan was to make the president fail so that he could start a revolution and overthrow him.
Oh, okay. I actually thought that's what it was, but then I was like, I still wasn't quite getting.
Well, that's exactly why for 24 years, I didn't understand the plot of the movie. And this time when I was watching it very carefully and taking notes for the podcast, I'm like, oh, now I get it. It only took 24 years.
I mean, I got what he was going for. The thing that didn't make any sense to me was why, when Tretiak is accusing the president of like being a traitor, does he like do the science experiment and really do it with like all of the necessary cathodes and things that one would need to prove cold fusion doesn't work? He makes the effort to like have all of this stuff there, and then it does work, and everyone in the crowd is like, oh, it does work, cold fusion is real. And you're like, wait a second, all of these pissed off like freezing Russians who have had no heat or hot water for weeks or months maybe, like they see a light bulb light up and they're like, oh, cold fusion is real. Like, how do they know? Like, what does that prove? But apparently it works, because then all of a sudden the crowd turns on Tretiak. It's not even just like convenient that it happens to work. It's just kind of like, but that doesn't make any fucking sense, like on any level.
Yeah, it's like me taking a gun and be like, look how badass I am. I'm going to shoot this gun. There's only one bullet in the revolver, so I'll probably be okay. Just take the bullets out of the revolver so that you can't accidentally ever shoot yourself. Like, just take one part of the cold fusion machine apart. So just in case it works, it looks like it's supposed to work, but it can't possibly ever work, even if the formula was correct.
Exactly.
And there's something here that I thought would have been more obvious to set up much earlier in the film. We're at the very end of Act 3 here, and the climax is over. And Simon says there are 3 things that have to happen when you become a saint. You have to perform 3 miracles. So he says, miracle number 1, that's when cold fusion worked. And miracle number 2, that is when Ivan, he gets arrested.
Let's unpack that a little bit. The first miracle is cold fusion. Yes, if cold fusion happens, that is a miracle. Although, counterpoint, he didn't fucking do it. Emma did it. He was just there when it happened. So I don't know that that counts as a miracle for him. But even more than that, then Tretiak is arrested. Okay, so a political rival is arrested in Russia, and he's like, that's miracle number 2. Like, is that a miracle, or does that happen all the time?
Well, I think the miracle was that the Russian people understood what cold fusion was, like you said before, because they wouldn't understand it, and then that they were like, oh yeah, let's arrest the other guy now. That's the miracle.
Oh,
so it doesn't
okay.
make sense.
I actually thought the first miracle was a weirder one. It's clearly science here. I thought a miracle is supposed to be, person coming back from the dead. Like, I thought that's supposed to be a miracle, not like I did a chemical reaction and it worked exactly as science said it would.
Look, none of us are theologists here. Let's just all agree that there were decent miracles. They could have been better.
Yeah, and so then Emma is back in England, and of course Simon shows up, and I was unclear here about like what's happening with this cold fusion. Does everyone now think that this Russian doctor invented cold fusion and Emma doesn't get the credit? Because she seemed to be like kind of okay with that. Like she thinks cold fusion should be free and should be for everyone. But then Simon's like, oh, you're going to be a trillionaire because everyone knows that you invented it somehow. And the fact that you're going to be super rich, that's the only reason I'm still here. And he's saying it as a joke, but like, dude, don't say that. Like, that's just not a thing you need to say. And then she says that she loves him, and he counts that as miracle number 3. Like, I mean, come on. Okay, really? And like the movie could have ended there, but then there's this other scene where she has this press conference and she's introducing cold fusion to the world, and Simon's there in disguise, really just to taunt the Scotland Yard guys. Like he goes and sits next to one of them and is like asking him questions. And then when the other one is like, that's him next to you, he sneaks out and, there's a chase. It's all completely superfluous and unnecessary and kind of a dick move. Like if that's his girlfriend, like this is her moment to shine. She invented cold fucking fusion and he's just making the moment all about him. That's just a dick move.
but he didn't want the $1 trillion. So it all is a happy ending.
But in a weird way, we learned earlier in the film that Simon has $50 million, which is not chump change. I was totally expecting at some point, like in the sewers, when the revolutionaries were like, pay us, I thought he was going to somehow give him his fortune or something. But no, this guy, he's like, I can't believe you gave up trillions of dollars, and we only have $50 million left between the two of us. So I didn't think it was that much of a sacrifice.
In today's money, that can only buy you a couple mansions. I mean, come on.
Yeah, but if you invested wisely in 1997, you could have a lot more. Hello. So he basically races away in a car, but he turns on the radio, and it's a radio announcer who is actually Roger Moore, the guy who played the original Saint in the series. He says that what I thought would have been maybe possibly the real miracle number 3, but he says that $3 billion were just donated to the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and the United Nations Children's Fund. And that Dr. Botvin, the Russian scientist, he's leading a non-profit firm that will develop the cold fusion technology. And I guess it's assumed that the $3 billion was routed from Tretiak's fortune. It's not totally clear, but I guess that's what you're supposed to assume.
I think so, but also then I'm still confused about this cold fusion thing, because I thought they already cracked it for real this time. And now they're like, oh, but now we need to develop it and work on it, and we're going to get there soon. It's like the light bulb went off in Russia. Like, what do you need to do? Didn't you fix it already? Didn't you figure it out?
The light bulb only went off for like 10 seconds. So I think there was a major breakthrough, but possibly they need to like tweak it perfectly.
Yeah, I kind of saw it more as like, oh, they developed it like the vaccine. You developed it, now you got to make it mass produce and test it and make it like a usable technology for everybody. So it wasn't that, oh, they still didn't make it work. They made it work, but now how do you actually implement that in the real world? But whatever.
I mean, I guess that makes sense, but like from the point of view of this is just an action movie, like it worked, we got it, you know, like it's over, come on, let the movie end. While he's driving away in the car, you can see from like the glare from the sunlight on the windshield, there's a halo around his head because he's the Saint. Get it? The Saint.
I didn't notice that.
It's faint. He's a faint saint. Yeah, that's terrible. Sorry. But that's the end of the movie. And Daron, you are our very special guest. So we ask you first, do you think The Saint stands the test of time?
Well, I know what Al's going to say, but so here's what I think doesn't hold up. The little bits of like encryption communications he uses is kind of goofy. It's like an old Nokia cell phone. But I think today you just give him a cell phone with WhatsApp or something else encrypted or whatever. They could easily fix that problem. I think the other things that don't hold up are the weird plot points we've discussed. Like some of the things they just missed. Like why do they go into this detailed explanation about cold fusion at the end? Like who cares? You're right. It was solved. Some of the other things like the black market people in the sewer, it's just odd. Why did the Russians hire Simon in the first place? Why did the hooker and her family help them and then not help them and then turn them in? I think all of those things, although minor, they started to add up for me. It's like, all right, I kind of have to suspend belief in some of these parts. I kind of have to just believe Emma knows how to solve the formula in 2 hours, and you just can't think about it too much. So I kind of just let it go, treated it like an action flick, was like, yeah, that'll work. Cold fusion works. That's cool. Other than that, what does stand the test of time, the spy genre, I think it works. It still works, obviously. And I remembered this more of an action flick than I did as a spy thriller. I had thought there were more car chases and more fights and more blow 'em ups. And I like this as more of a master of disguise type of thing. And, you know, the biggest thing for me that holds up are Val Kilmer and Elizabeth Shue. Their performances are awesome. Val Kilmer, especially in all his disguises and his affects of the characters he does, is great. And Elizabeth Shue, she doesn't have to do much, but she plays this amazing, naive, do-gooder. Like, you believe that she believes that cold fusion technology works, and you can believe that she would fall for him because he's manipulating her, but you also believe that he would fall for her because she's Elizabeth Shue. I believe it. And I think probably the novelization of the movie would get more into the backstory and explain more of their love story, but it was enough for me that I believed in. I think their performances were great. And, you mentioned early on the fact that it was clearly 1990s Russia. I think the whole political plot and the technology thing could be implemented in any modern day country. Quite frankly, that could be today's Russia because it's so messed up over there. Like that could easily work today. And I liked the subtle humor that was in there. The costume changes were there for laughs, I think. And it was just enough that it made it interesting for me. So overall, I think the positives outweigh the negatives. I thought this was going to be worse than it was, honestly, because I remembered only a few things about it. So I will say that it does stand the test of time.
All right. Al, you've never seen this film before, so I'm super curious. What do you think of this film? Does The Saint stand the test of time?
A lumberjack eating a pickle on a Tuesday. You said you knew what I was going to say. Did you know I was going to say that, Daron?
Yes.
You did? Oh, man, you're good. All right. Well, I mean, there's a reason you've been on the show 6 times. I thought this movie was a pile of hot garbage. I mean, it is really terrible. And I think you kind of touched on something there, Daron, when you were talking about like the different sort of genres of like, is it a spy movie or is it an action movie? And there's also a lot of the romance stuff in here. When Simon and Emma meet and they go on their date and they go to her apartment, I felt like it really slowed the movie down. And I could imagine in my head, like network executives saying like, oh, it's got something for the fellas because it's got car chases and action, and it's got something for the ladies because there's romance too. And like, yeah, okay, eye roll. But like, it doesn't do any of those things well, and it doesn't do the spy stuff well either, because if you're going to make an intelligent spy thriller, like a political cat and mouse thing, like you can do that. That's great. But then you need the plot to, what's that thing? Oh yeah, make some fucking sense, which they do not bother with in this movie. It's just stupid that everywhere the good guys go, the bad guys are right there. The mechanics of the plot don't make any sense. The mechanics of the science are just dumb. And like, I get it that like cold fusion can just sort of be like this easy MacGuffin, but put a little bit of thought into it, like maybe do something clever with solving the energy crisis. Nah, they don't bother. I just don't think that it works like on any level, except that Elizabeth Shue is in it, and I would watch her in a movie where she reads the phone book. I love her. It's great seeing her, but she has been in some clunkers. We talked about Hollow Man earlier in the year. It's just not a great movie that even Elizabeth Shue can't save. I'm going to say that the movie does not stand the test of time. And I do just have one other thought that doesn't have anything to do with the movie standing the test of time. And you guys might not know this, we're 3 Jews here, but is that rule true about like the 3 miracles? Like you can only be a saint if you commit 3 miracles? Do you know?
Yes. I lied earlier. I am a theologist, and yes, that's true.
Okay, that's fine, and this has absolutely nothing to do with the movie, but all I could think of is like, what if there are all of these people who performed 2 amazing miracles that like had a huge impact on people, but sorry, the rule is 3. Yeah, you don't make the club.
Them's the rules.
Rules are rules. Sorry, no one's ever going to know your name. You're not going to be name checked in a terrible 1997 Val Kilmer movie. Sorry.
I think since there's no definition of miracle, I think they probably are like, oh, and they were a wonderful person. Even in such a horrible time, that's a miracle.
That's how Mother Teresa got in.
Well, James, we've got 1 vote for yes and 1 vote for no. You're the tiebreaker. What do you think? Does The Saint stand the test of time?
You know, we're approaching 250 the episodes of this podcast. We've been doing this now for 5 years, and while watching this film, I know you so well now that I'm like, oh man, Al hated this part. Oh my God, Al's writing this part down, and he hates this. He probably liked this part, but hates. And there were so many parts in this film that I knew you hated, and I'm glad I was correct about all of those things. First, the things that I think do hold up. I said before, I think the costume work is fantastic. I think the music is very good. Actually, the composer of the music, this guy, Graham Revel, he actually won an award for this movie. It was the BMI Film and TV Awards, but still, he won an award for it. Yeah.
A BMI, a BMITAFA.
And I will say also, I agree with Daron. I think the acting is good in this film. There was a little Val Kilmer backlash at this time because the Batman films were really disliked. And I think maybe they were kind of ragging on him a little. But he was nominated for a Razzie for this movie. I don't think that's fair.
Totally
I don't
fair.
know what.
Totally fair.
No, how is that fair?
I think you may not like the film. I thought his acting was good. And I'll also say the premise of the film, I think the premise is great. You know, it's different than other spy films because there's no agency he works for. You don't know where he's getting clients from. There's no Q or M. And he's just kind of an independent guy. And his shtick, and I didn't know that this wasn't, I assume this was the Saints' whole deal with his costumes, but I guess it's just made up for this film. I like that premise. But some things that don't work, the love story in this film. Val Kilmer's character, Simon, steals Elizabeth Shue's character's life work, and she just quickly forgives him when he's like, I'm sorry. I didn't really understand why she was super trusting of him after that. I still don't understand the prologue of this film. I understand what you mean, that it establishes like his Catholic education background, but there is no payoff. And I agree with you, Al. I thought that girl in the beginning was going to turn out to be Elizabeth Shue. But also, I didn't think the epilogue was necessary at all. I actually thought if it ended in Russia with cold fusion working and everyone kind of happy, I thought that was a good ending. But I remember being actually very excited to see this film because I do remember the trailer. And the trailer basically has a cut of like the 13 different characters he plays and all the different voices. And you know, I always liked Val Kilmer. I think he's fun and I think he's a good actor. So I was excited for this film. And, you know, this reminds me of another film that we reviewed a while ago, Time Cop with Jean-Claude Van Damme. I actually think there's something very similar about these two films. I think that it's a mediocre film in what could be a really good franchise. I think that had this film been like the third film in like a 5-film series, this would have been one of the forgetful ones. Unfortunately, this is the establishment movie, and I just think that the plot itself is stupid. I don't find it interesting. Again, I like the premise of the character. I just think that the story is weak. There isn't really a huge payoff at the end. You know, a lot of things just don't add up. And I think I have the same feeling that I did 24 years ago when I saw this. And that's just, I'm disappointed by it. I wish it was better. So I'm going to say no. Unfortunately, The Saint does not stand the test of time. That being said, I'm excited that you mentioned now that this is being shopped around to be another movie or another series or something, because I'd really like to see another shot at this premise.
Man, when you said it was like Time Cop, I thought I had it, but thought I had it.
That was a great premise. A cop that has to monitor time travel. It's a great premise. And unfortunately, it's just a mediocre movie.
I think when you're talking about like the love story not working, they kept coming back to this theme of identity, and Emma keeps asking him, who are you? And it's a question because we don't know who he is, and he doesn't have a real name or a real home, and who is he really? And he even says, nobody knows, least of all me. And like that concept of a man who is everybody but is also no one, that's interesting. That could be something, but it's just not. I don't think Val Kilmer does a good job here. I think he earned that Razzie nomination. He apparently turned down Batman and Robin to do this movie, which is like, in my opinion, 6 of one, half dozen or the other. He was going to be in one shitty movie or another. He picked this one, and then George Clooney was in the other. Okay, whatever. All that said, Daron, we still love it when you come by, even when I shit on your movies. No, don't boo. We love you.
For what it's worth, Lorelai wanted to add that she thought the movie stood the test of time. And I said it's not worth anything. So,
of course, we value Lorelai's opinion, Lorelai being your wife, for people who don't know. But yes. Daron, tell our listeners once again where they can find your podcast, Board Games Are for Losers.
Well, we're on all the podcast sites. You can just search us, Board Games Are for Losers. We also have a website, boardgamesareforlosers.com, and we're on all the Instagrams and Twitters and Facebooks at Board Game Losers.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Daron. We'll have you back on for a 7th appearance at some point.
So you can break my heart again. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of fun breaking your heart over and over and over again.
Agreed.
You just keep coming back for more punishment. All right, well, that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we are going to come back to talk about Reservoir Dogs, Quentin Tarantino's first movie that he directed. That'll be a good episode, so don't miss it. Make sure you're subscribed on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, whatever platform you listen to us on. Subscribe to us. Subscribe to Board Games Are for Losers while you're there. Talk to us. We are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Tag at Board Game Losers, especially if you're going to make fun of this movie, because Daron loves that. I unleashed the trolls on you.
All 2 of them will come at me.
Our listeners are very nice. They're very polite on social media. But that's it. We'll see you next time, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.